It's not a secret that GA4, even after years of development, still has many flaws. That's why many digital marketeers are using BigQuery to replace or partially replace the GA4 interface. In today's video, I'm going to give you an example of a report that's very flawed still in GA4, the landing page report, and I'm going to show you how you can fix this through BigQuery. Let's dive in. Hey and welcome to the channel. My name is Leon. This channel exists to help you as a digital marketeer get trustworthy data so your campaigns can run at their full potential. I want to thank everyone that has been liking my videos and has subscribed to the channel recently, because that really helps me get these videos out to as many people as I can. As a way to say thank you, I have created a free cookie banner that you can use instead of a paid consent management platform. So if you're interested in that, go to the link in the video description to get that for free. There's even a free workshop included where I show you how to install and set it up on your site. So again, if you're interested, download via the link in the video description. Now back to the video content. Alright, as I said, GA4, even after years of development, still has many flaws. And one of the best examples, in my opinion, is the landing page report. So here it is. If you open up a landing page report on a random GA4 property, you will probably find a row not set that has a high amount of sessions. And it's usually somewhere in the top 10. And to be honest, usually it's high in the top 10. So think top 3, top 5 landing pages, somewhere over there. So on a high number of landing pages or on a high number of sessions, in this case 30% of my sessions, over 30%, the landing page is unknown. And sometimes even revenue and conversion metrics. In this case, that's not the case. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to improve upon this report, how to fix this through BigQuery. So here is a query that I ran over exactly the same time period. So here we have a landing page report or a table with landing pages with the amount of sessions, users, bounce rate, the engagement time, so the time that people spend on the site, and the amount of conversions. So this is what we're going to do today. I'm going to show you exactly the steps needed to get here. There are two prerequisites. First of all, you need to have a daily export enabled from GA4 into BigQuery. I will put a link in the video description to a video that I created walking you through the steps on how to do that. The second thing that's probably beneficial is I created some kind of a starter guide. So the basic concepts on how to get started with BigQuery. So you don't necessarily need to watch that, but I might skip over some concepts. And if you don't understand something or it goes a little bit too fast, go back to that video, watch that first, and then come back to this video. It'll make a lot more sense, I think. We're going to start off with just retrieving some of our raw data from our GA4 events table. And with me, it's on this project in this folder. And then what I like to do is I like to select events underscore and then this star. So in this way, I can do where table suffix between, and then I can select a date range. So in this case, the 1st of January until the end of May. My site doesn't have that much data, so I like to select a little bit of a wider date range so we get some data in our report. Another thing that I like to do is I like to filter out all the user pseudo ID rows that are null. So we're going to only see events that have a user pseudo ID. That is because consent mode, especially if people click deny, so analytics storage is set to denied, those users will still end up in this table. But if we're going to query those, it's going to pollute our reports a little bit. So I like to filter those out, only work with the data of people that have actually consented. So this is our first step. This is the raw data that we're working with. And if I just press enter to this query, we're basically just selecting every column. So the result of this will look familiar if you have watched my previous video on BigQuery, my introduction video. This just contains like every column. And as you can see, it's just a lot. And every row is a separate event. And the first step that I like to do is I like to not select everything. I like to filter out just the columns that I need. So that's basically what I do here. This is exactly the same query. So it's select star, but this time we're not going to select everything. We're going to select a couple of columns. And if I run this, you'll see what I mean. Let me just uncomment this and then run it again. You'll see what I mean. This is exactly the same table, but now I have made a selection of the columns that I want to see. And I did some nesting as well, because as you can see in the previous selection that we did, there's a lot of nested information in the GA4 BigQuery table. And sometimes we want to unnest that to get it in a separate column. Again, if you don't understand exactly what I'm talking about, just watch the previous video and it will give you a lot of clarity. But let's go over the columns that I have selected here, because I have selected the user pseudo ID, which is basically the cookie ID. So if I go to your site, I get a cookie on my device in my browser, and that allows GA to recognize me if I'm a returning visitor. So we're gonna leverage that same ID here. Also, I selected a GA session ID. And to be honest, the events table doesn't have a good session identifier, but usually that is generated by just slamming these two fields together. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I use the concatenate function with two parameters. So first of all, the user pseudo ID, and then I just append the session ID to that number. So if I show you the result here, you see the user pseudo ID and the session ID. And if I slam that together, I get a unique session identifier here. So this part, the first part here is the user pseudo ID, and the second part here is the session ID. Just for illustration purposes, I also included the event name, so you can see very clearly here that like this is a single session, and at the start there's a first visit event recorded, a session start event, a page view event, a scroll event, user engagement event, link click. So that's just for illustration purposes. I'm gonna remove that later. I don't need it later, but I just wanted to show you like what we're dealing with here. The page location, so I selected the location of every event. So what you see is this session landed on the home page. So the URL here is this is the full URL. And then after a while, this person clicked to the next page, to my blog. So there you go. And after a while, another page was opened. This field is needed because we need to extract the first URL of every session. Lastly, I also included two engagement fields. So first of all, I like to know the engagement time. So for every event, sometimes an engagement time is registered. So in this case, it's on scroll. In this case, it's on user engagement. In this case, it's on link click. And this is done automatically by GA. I haven't set up a thing for this. This is done automatically through a Google tag, I guess. And also I included the session engaged. This is just a signal. So at the start, the session wasn't engaged because the session was just beginning. The definition of an engaged session is either 2 pages or more than 10 seconds on the first page. So in this case, on the second page load, GA marks this as an engaged session. And that's also beneficial for our report. Just for educational purposes, I filtered this down for a single session. So I have 46 rows here, all belonging to the same session identifier. And the next step that we need to do here is we need to bring down these events. We need to bring down the granularity. So right now we have separate rows per event. We want to group all this to make this into a single row. We want to have one row per session. And the result of that looks like this. Yeah, there you go. Let me just query this. Let me run this query. And now we're going to get a single row. So here in our previous query, we had like a row per event. And in our next query, we have a single row for one session. So it's basically grouping together all the events and listing it as one row. And I did some other tricks here as well. Instead of listing the full URL, what I like to do is I like to do the landing page path. So without the domain name and without query parameters. I did count the number of views in that session. I did like a sum on the engagement time. And I list, is this session engaged? And the number of conversions in that session. So let's walk through how this is done. So the gist of it is I did a group by. So I'm grouping the entire table. So this entire query, what I added is I did a group by user pseudo ID and session ID. So it's basically just going to group everything together by user pseudo ID and session ID. And everything that's the same user pseudo ID and session ID is going to land on the same row. And to get the other fields working together with this, I did a couple of things. So let's just walk through this real quick. First of all, I did comment out the event name. And instead of that, I did count if event name page views as views. So it's gonna just count all the rows that have event name as page view, and it's gonna put that down as the number of views. So that's this. So I have 6 page view events in this session. So if I go back into here and I'm gonna count like all the page view events, I'm probably gonna count 6 of them. So that's what this function does. Also, I did a sum on the engagement time. So it's just gonna add together all the engagement time cells that I have here. So it's basically just gonna do like this plus this plus this plus this plus this. It's just gonna sum it all together into a single row. Also, I did a max on the session engaged. So if there is an event that has session engaged as 1, it's just gonna do 1. If it only has session engaged 0 throughout the entire session, it's gonna give me back 0. In this case, I have session engaged 1 is the max value, so it's just gonna return 1 here. Yeah, there you go. So it's just the maximum value. And then again, the amount of conversions. So I'm just gonna count event name contact form submits. And if you want to use this query for your own, of course you need to fill out your event name, the event name that you have as a conversion. So in this case, contact form submit is my conversion, and it's gonna count like all the rows that have event name contact form submit in it, just like we did here. In this case, we don't have conversions, so the conversions is 0. As I said, I did one trick here, the landing page path. This is probably the most important piece here, and it is I'm doing a couple of things here. Let's do this step by step. So I'm just gonna comment this out, and this is the first part. I probably can run this, and I'm gonna show you what this does. What I'm doing here is I'm extracting the first page location that I have. So in this case, it's this one. So this function is just going through the entire table and finds the first value that is not null for the page location. And it returns it in this format. So the landing page as a full URL, so including the domain name and including the page, like the parameters, if there are any parameters. And there's another thing that I like, another function that I use around this, and that's this regex extract. It's this function, and it's basically extracting the domain name and the parameters from it, and then listing the path only. So here I have the result from a single session, but if I remove my my session filter here, was just for educational purposes, just to show you what we're working with. If I remove that filter, we get a full table of every session that I had in that time period, with the landing page path, with the amount of use of that session, with the engagement time, with the sessions engaged, with the amount of conversions in that session. And this is really the first step that we need to take. And the last step, the second step that we need to take, is to convert this and group this by landing page path, because we basically just want the amount of sessions. We want to count the amount of sessions that we had on our homepage. So the next step, let me just show you the result of that, just to help you get your mind around what we're working with. So instead of having a separate row for each session, the next step is to group this by landing page path. So instead of a separate row per session, we want a separate row per landing page. How do we do that? Well, I like to work with subqueries. So this is unchanged. This is exactly the same as before, but now I have a second subquery, landing pages. And landing pages is a subquery that queries the sessions subquery. So landing pages just references this one. We're selecting the landing page path. So we're basically doing the same trick again. We're grouping like all the sessions by landing page path. So every session that has the same landing page path is going to belong on the same line. So just like here, so landing page, so all the sessions that had the homepage as a landing page are now on the same line. And we want to just combine the amount of sessions, amount of users, etc. So let me just walk through how I did this. I'm selecting the landing page path, and I'm also grouping on the landing page path, and I'm counting the distinct session IDs as sessions. So basically, I'm just counting like how many unique session identifiers do I have in this table, and how many distinct user pseudo ID values do I have in my table. And that's the amount of users. So the amount of sessions that had landing page path as a, like the homepage as a landing page path is 477, and the amount of users, like unique users, is 318. Also, I want the amount of conversions. I just did a simple summing here. So the amount of conversions from the homepage was 11. And I did a couple of things here to get the engagement right. So the average engagement in seconds is it starts here. Save divide. It means like, okay, I want the average time that people spend on that landing page. So I have the total time here. So it's a sum. And I basically just divide it by the amount of sessions. And this line is exactly the same as I have here. So distinct session ID. It's the amount of sessions. So I basically divide the total time on that landing page. I divide it by the amount of sessions. And I also divide it by 1,000 because it's in milliseconds. I wanted to convert that into seconds. Then I convert it into a piece of text and I add the letter S to it. So that's just for reading purposes. If you want to process this in a tool like Looker, you probably don't want this, but just to make this a little bit more readable, I just put the letter S next to it. The same goes for bounce rate. I also did a division here. So I count these engaged sessions, the total amount of engaged sessions, and I divided those with the total amount of sessions. I then did it times 100 to get it into a percentage. And this is basically the engagement rate. The bounce rate is the opposite of that. So it's 100 minus the engagement rate. I wanted a round number and then I added the percentage. That's just a couple of things on a couple of lines, but that gave me the bounce rate right here. And that gave me the end result of today. The landing pages with the amount of sessions, the users, the bounce rate, the engagement time, and the amount of conversions. All right, now that we have our end result, let's do a quick comparison between our BigQuery report and our GA4 report that I have right here. As you can see, the first thing that was the end goal of this video, of course, is I don't have a not set row in here. So that also means that the sessions that I have here are probably distributed across all the other pages. So expect the number of sessions to be a little bit higher here and there. And that is correct. The homepage has more sessions here than I have in GA4. So I have a little bit more specific information about which landing page is performing better. Also, the amount of users is in the same ballpark. So 315, 318. The bounce rate, by the way, bounce rate is by default not in the landing page report, so I had to add it manually via the customized report. It's, to me, one of the most important metrics on a landing page, so I don't know why they don't include it by default. But here we can compare. And again, not set has almost 100% bounce in my case. So I expect all the other values to be a little bit higher in the BigQuery report, and that is correct. The homepage has 45. And the second page here, instead of 16, has 24. So it's a little bit higher, but that's to be expected if the not set values are distributed across all the other pages. Also, I find that the conversions are attributed a little bit different because we don't use the session start event. It's maybe a little bit technical, but we really just look at the session, like where did the session begin. So in this case, I have 8 conversions from my homepage, and in this case, I have 11. So I think this BigQuery report is a little bit better in that sense. All right, let's look at some next steps, because you could just rely on GA4 for your daily analysis. But if you want to go deeper, you can use this query to look a little bit closer to the landing pages and, for instance, make a quarterly report or something that has to be a little bit better, a little bit more specific. But something else that you could do if you want to just completely bypass GA4, you could make a scheduled query from this report and import that into Looker. So you could use for instance, the scheduled queries that are right here, or you could use data form. I might do a tutorial on this in the future. For now, I want to keep it a little bit more simple and focus on the queries themselves. But you could make a second dimension here with a date. And if you make a scheduled query and make a daily process that processes the landing pages of yesterday, you can generate a Looker dashboard from this that you can rely on instead of the landing page report from GA4. An added benefit of that is that if you make Looker dashboards from a BigQuery table, they are lightning fast. So I really like those, but it's not always worth the time investment of making the scheduled query, etc. But that could be a next step for you. All right, I hope this video was clear. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. Also, what topic would you like me to cover next? What is a problem that you haven't been able to solve in GA4 that you want me to have a look at within BigQuery? Please let me know down in the comments. I love to hear from you. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.